100 years inside of a swampy lake. There were piles of stones covering the skeletons of at least 10 people, along with ancient weapons made of stone and antlers. The workers also discovered the old bones of badger, deer, bears, and boar. 2 of the human skulls that were found were mounted on sharp stakes. This was a very creepy discovery, and thousands of years ago, the burial mound was likely a large pile of rocks rising above the water near an ancient settlement, covered in strange wooden structures, weapons, and the mounted remains of the most fearsome animals in the region. And, of course, heads on spikes. Stockholm University's Sarah Gummison explained that this archaeological site was the first example of discovering heads mounted on stakes from the Stone Age in Sweden. But the reason these people mounted heads is a little different than what you might be thinking. Forensic analysis of the skulls showed that these people had indeed suffered wounds from battle, but they had already healed. This suggests the dead people were members of the community who fought in battles and survived them. Rather than mounting the heads of their enemies, this unknown ancient civilization probably did so with the heads of their most treasured warriors. It was more of a celebrated burial than a humiliation for their enemies. Number 9. The creepy mummy. Takabuti is an ancient mummy sitting in a glass case at the Ulster Museum in Belfast. She was discovered in 1835 and has been a mystery ever since. But over 150 years after she was discovered, Egyptologist Rosalind David and her team of scientists decided to finally unlock this ancient woman's secrets using CT scans and other high-tech investigative methods. What they discovered is not only creepy, but absolutely fascinating. The initial investigation revealed that Takabuti had come to a miserable end, either from an enemy attack or a betrayal. She was between 20 and 30 when killed. Her teeth were in pretty good condition, and even today, she is exceptionally well preserved. Her features are surprisingly lifelike, and her hair is still in great shape. What's really fascinating about Takabuti is that she still had all of her hair at the time of death, which was strange in ancient Egypt because most people shaved their heads to avoid lice and wore wigs instead. Takabuti was an exception, probably because she had reddish blonde hair, which would have made her quite unusual and unique to ancient Egyptians. In the end, scans revealed that Takabuti had been stabbed in the back, likely with some kind of axe weapon. Researchers believe the weapon was probably Assyrian, and that would make sense because the Assyrians had been invading Egypt at the time of her death. But because the wound was found at the back of the woman's ribs, scientists have also speculated that she may have been literally stabbed in the back, perhaps by another member of Egyptian society. Number 8. The Maya slave ship. For the first time in history, a very disturbing discovery involving the Mayans and slavery has been discovered. The ship was originally found in 2017, but it wasn't until just recently that scientists finally discovered its true purpose. The wreckage of the ship was discovered off the coast of Mexico and was a kind of paddle wheel steamboat from Cuba. It had likely been used to carry Maya people from the Americas to Cuba, where they were then sold into slavery. The ship probably functioned between 1847 and 1901 during the War of the Castes, a time when the Mayan people, still living on the Yucatan Peninsula, rebelled against their European rulers. Slavery was illegal in Mexico by this time, but that didn't stop operators from forcing indigenous Mayans into signing work contracts and then shipping them off to Cuba, where their rights would be stripped away and they'd be treated as slaves. The Mayans were sold to a middleman for about 25 pesos, then sold again in Havana for even more, with male Mayans going for 160 pesos and women going for 120 pesos. This particular slave ship was on its way to Cuba when its boiler blew up off the coast of Sicily. It sat at the bottom of the water for over 100 years. We don't know how many Maya lost their lives on the boat, as instead of being listed as passengers, they were probably listed as cargo and undocumented. Number 7. Peruvian cat claws. Some very unique artifacts were recently discovered inside of the tomb of a nobleman in Peru. Experts were digging at the archaeological site of Huaca de la Luna when they uncovered a strange set of claws, a very creepy mask, and a scepter. The artifacts probably belonged to the forgotten Moche civilization. The claws were used as part of a costume worn by participants in a Moche combat ritual, and the claws would have been part of an outfit made from animal skin. The ritual involved two men battling, the winner receiving the claws as a prize and the loser being sacrificed to the gods. According to archaeologist Santiago Uceda, the scepter would have signified power, while a pair of earrings discovered would have symbolized status. These clues suggest the nobleman buried inside the tomb was a warrior of some renown and possibly very well respected in society. He had likely won at least one combat ritual and taken the claws as his prize. As for the Moche civilization, they date back to at least 1500 years, meaning they predate the Inca society. Their culture was centered around modern Trujillo. In 800 AD, the Moche disappeared from the history books, and nobody knows why. The society kept no written record of their exploits. Everything that we know about the Moche must be interpreted from the pottery and jewelry, weapons and armor, and other archaeological relics they left behind. What do you think about the Moche combat ritual? Is the loser being sacrificed a little harshly? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you're not subscribed to the channel, be sure to hit that button. Number 6. Railway skeletons. Railway work next to the Liverpool Street Station in London has unveiled thousands of ancient skeletons. Archaeologists began excavating the bones of at least 3,000 people buried between the 16th and 17th century, all of whom had been forgotten when the Crossrail transit line was built over the top of their graves. They probably came from the first ever insane asylum in the world, the nearby Bedlam Hospital. The archaeological dig is the biggest to happen in London in the past few decades, with all the decomposed skeletons needing to be carefully exhumed and then reburied elsewhere. They excavated wooden coffins filled with babies and found giant piles of bones and skulls. Scientists hope to find more information about how ancient people in London lived and about the bubonic plague that probably killed a lot of them. The cemetery first opened in 1569 to accommodate the overspill coming from the city's churchyard burial grounds. It was also the main burial grounds used for the Bedlam Hospital. Tests on the bones revealed that many of the people here died from one of the plague outbreaks that ravaged London on and off for about 200 years. It was also used to bury people during the Great Plague of 1665 that killed over 100,000 people. Number 5. Hitler's Wolf Lair. Before Hitler invaded the Soviet Union in 1941, he built a military headquarters in Eastern Europe for the base of his operations. These headquarters became known as the Wolf's Lair, and researchers in Poland have made some new and exciting discoveries at this very creepy piece of history. Exploration work was carried out by the Latorba Foundation from Gdańsk. Researchers discovered armored doors and a secret stairway leading down into Hitler's barracks, along with a special set of doors designed to protect the Führer from chemical attacks. Investigators even found some smaller items inside Hitler's bunker, like pipes and taps. But perhaps the most fascinating discovery was a stone with the engraving of Hitler's escort battalion. Investigators were able to determine exactly which barracks Hitler's special escort lived in. This wasn't a revolutionary discovery, but it's always pretty creepy to find anything new inside an old Nazi ruin, especially one hidden in the dark Polish forest. Number 4. The 30 Years' War. In 2011, archaeologists found a massive graveyard that contained at least 175 bodies dating back to the legendary Battle of Lutzen. This battle was between the Protestant forces of Sweden, led by King Gustav II Adolf, and a Catholic army led by Ulbricht von Wallenstein of Czech. It was one of the bloodiest battles in the 30 Years' War, with an estimated 9,000 deaths, including the King of Sweden. But what's really strange is that no bodies were ever found, even though the battle went down as recently as 1632. Archaeologists excavated a huge portion of the battlefield and found thousands of amazing relics, but they never found any human remains. Not until 2011, when they finally discovered a single mass grave left over from the battle. It's believed that the dead were removed from the battlefield by the residents of Lützen, and then buried carefully at the sides of the road. Archaeologists now believe there are probably dozens of hidden mass graves all throughout the area, all of them still undiscovered. As for the battle itself, it was a Protestant victory. They stopped the advancing Catholics despite suffering huge losses. The place where King Gustav II Adolf got cut down was marked with a huge boulder the day after. The rock is still there in the field today. Number 3. The oldest worm. An extremely creepy creature that lived 555 million years ago has been discovered as the first ancestor on a family tree that contains just about every animal on Earth today, including humans. The ultimate ancestor is a fat purple worm and the earliest bilaterian ever. The specimen was discovered by geologists from UC Riverside. Bilaterian means an organism with a front and a back, two perfectly symmetrical sides, and an opening at each end connected by a gut. Basically, a worm. This particular worm is named Icaria wariotia, and its development was the first step in complex life on our planet. You might be wondering, what about multicellular organisms like sponges? These were definitely around first, but they aren't actually related to animals like monkeys or humans. They lack mouths and guts. The sponges of millions of years ago are very similar to the sponges of the day. It was the first bilaterian worm that pushed evolution forward. It was the first organism that was able to move, and the first organism with a gut and a rudimentary mouth. As the worm evolved, it gave organisms the opportunity to organize their bodies in different ways. Millions of years later, the creepy little worm evolved into, well, basically everything. Number 2. The impaled skull of Phineas Gage. One of the creepiest and most famous skulls in the entire world is the impaled skull of Phineas Gage. On September 13, 1848, Phineas was blasting rock in Vermont. Phineas filled a hole with blasting powder before covering it with dirt and clay and pounding everything into the hole using an old tool known as a tamping iron. It was basically an iron rod almost 4 feet or 1.2 meters long. While doing this, Phineas accidentally created a spark with the iron and the rock, exploding the ingredients he just stuffed into the hole. The giant rod then exploded into his face, shooting through his left jaw and sprouting through his cheek, narrowly missing his eye, then blowing out the backside of his brain. Phineas Gage was a little shocked by what happened. He sat down, had a bit of a think, then got up and walked to the local doctor. He was totally fine. The iron rod shot through him and went out the other side, somehow missing everything important. Phineas Gage would go on to live for 12 long years after this incident, until the age of 36. He died in 1860, at which point Harvard Medical School took his skull and put it in their museum. The skull may not have been found by any archaeological means, but it's still pretty creepy. It's sitting inside of a glass case along with the iron rod on the 5th floor of Harvard's Medical School in the Warren Anatomical Museum. Number 1. Medieval lepers. When researchers began to excavate the medieval site of the St. Mary Magdalene Hospital Cemetery in England, they were hoping to genotype a certain strain of leprosy. There's no medieval disease worse than leprosy, and researchers wanted to figure out where the disease came from and how it evolved into one of the worst epidemics in the Middle Ages. Researchers found skeletons covered in leprosy lesions. Among these skeletons was one that scientists found particularly compelling. The skeleton belonged to a young man who traveled a very far distance to die. DNA evidence showed that the pilgrim came from as far away as Africa to be treated in the earliest leprosy hospital in Western Europe, where he, of course, died. According to the same study, researchers were able to determine that the bacteria which causes leprosy has barely changed in the past few hundred years, which logically explains why the disease more or less vanished after peaking in medieval Europe. Everyone became resistant to the disease. But don't let these ancient skeletons fool you. Leprosy is still around today. Of course, the disease doesn't happen very often. It's also curable with drug therapy. Way back in 2000, the WHO declared leprosy is no longer a public health problem. This means there is less than one case in 10,000 people. In the skies. They witnessed a very rare daytime fireball that was so intense that it triggered a sonic boom over both countries. The sonic boom was so loud that it was heard all the way from southwest England to the north of France. In fact, the boom was so intense that people thought there were fighter jets streaking across the skies above them. It was the Ministry of Defense who quickly came forward and announced there were no jets that day. It wasn't until later that satellite images confirmed a massive fireball meteor had broken apart in the atmosphere, creating one of the biggest fireballs ever seen in modern times. This wasn't just an ordinary meteor, though. It was what scientists call a fireball meteor. According to Live Science, a fireball meteor almost always emits light either equal to or greater than Venus seen in the sky at night. Fireballs burn this bright because of how fast they're going, usually going faster than the speed of sound. This is how they create a sonic boom before ultimately breaking apart. Also because of how big they are. Most fireballs come from parent asteroids that are, at a minimum, 3.3 feet or 1 meter across. According to the AMS, as meteors hit the planet's atmosphere, it slows down due to friction and heats up, releasing energy in the form of visible light. Number 9. Frozen iguanas. Only in Florida could a falling iguana alert be issued. The alert warned residents to be on the lookout for lizards literally dropping out of the sky. These alerts are activated only when the temperature gets so cold that iguanas slip into a state of dormancy. Any iguana that happens to be in a tree when the temperature gets so cold will fall off a branch and go crashing to the ground. This results in frozen iguanas literally raining down from above. And of course, the last thing anyone wants during the Christmas season is a frozen iguana knocking them in the head. Luckily, these iguanas aren't actually dead. They go into a kind of suspended animation and should absolutely not be touched or bothered when found on the ground. As soon as the sun rays come back out and the weather heats up, the iguanas will go back to their business and climb up their trees again. This usually happens in January when temperatures dip into the 30s Fahrenheit. Usually there's no damage caused by the lizards, except for one case in 2017 when a photographer had an iguana smash through his van's windshield. The iguana hit the windshield so hard that it snapped out of its dormant state and ran away. Number 8. UFO over Hawaii. A mysterious blue UFO has been spotted over Hawaii, with the entire thing being captured on video. This happened as recently as December 29th, 2020. As if the year couldn't get any worse, the sightings of the UFO prompted fears of an alien invasion. Eyewitnesses discovered the strange spacecraft hovering in the night sky on the Hawaiian island of Oahu. It was so obviously a UFO that people panicked and started calling 911. In the video footage taken of the unidentified flying object, a glowing blue form is visibly hanging out in the sky. It moved across the clouds and eventually crashed into the sea without making a sound. One eyewitness told Hawaii News Now that she even saw a second UFO appear. This one wasn't blue though. It was white and followed the same direction as the first one before eventually disappearing. The Federal Aviation Administration was quick to rule out a crashed aircraft. Nobody could say for certain what these terrifying objects were. Some claimed that the floating blue object could have been an LED kite. But what about the second one? What do you think? Can we chalk these sightings up to glowing kites, or should Hawaii be worried about alien invaders? Number 7. Waterspouts. Waterspouts are a fantastic phenomenon most people never get to see in their life. And yet, residents off the coast in Louisiana witnessed on August 20th, 2020, 6 waterspouts funneling from the sea to the sky in the Gulf of Mexico. Waterspouts are basically water tornadoes. They appear very rarely, and there's usually only one of them at a time. But this incident had 6 spinning all at once, making it look as though the world were about to end as spinning water tornadoes sped towards the shore. Waterspouts are generally rated as EF0 tornadoes, meaning they are actually quite weak. They only produce winds up to 85 miles per hour. But how does a waterspout form in the sky? Well, they are really just rotating columns of air that form over water. They don't actually suck any water. They definitely spray a lot of water around, but waterspouts are more like optical illusions created by air vortexes. The most waterspouts ever witnessed at the same time were 9 on the surface of Lake Michigan. Have you ever been lucky enough to see a waterspout? If so, where did you see it? Let me know in the comments section below. And while you're at it, go ahead and like this video and hit that subscribe button too. Number 6. A winged monster. Disturbing images of a monster creature with wings leaping between the trees has once again sparked fears that the legendary Mothman is back. For those of you who don't know, the Mothman is supposedly a monster that looks kind of like a human, but has large moth-like wings, and he's often spotted flying through the trees of West Virginia. The Mothman was first spotted in November of 1966 by gravediggers in Point Pleasant. There were further sightings all the way up until 1967, when 46 people died on the Silver Bridge, following a string of eyewitness accounts. Rumor has it that the Mothman is the sinister harbinger of doom! These most recent photographs came from a man in Point Pleasant. He discovered what almost looked like a man in a wingsuit flying through the darkness. He immediately sent the pictures to a local news outlet, and the rumors quickly spread that Mothman had returned to West Virginia. It definitely wasn't a giant bat. Is it possible that it could have been an owl or a different bird carrying off a snake or some other prey? So far as West Virginia residents are concerned, this creature is definitely the Mothman. Number 5. Blood rain. Sometimes, blood falls from the sky. In ancient times, people used to associate experiencing droplets of blood falling from above as signs of the apocalypse. In fact, incidents of blood rain have been reported as far back as the 8th century BCE. But what causes blood to literally rain down from the heavens? Blood rain is actually caused by dust and sand from the Sahara Desert. It's a type of weather phenomenon in which red dust and sand mixes with precipitation, and then what falls is red rain. Dust can blow as far as 2,500 miles or 4,023 kilometers from Africa, where it reaches Europe in places like the United Kingdom, Spain, and the south of France. It then falls in heavy droplets of crimson liquid. In Kerala, back in 2015, blood rain occurred because spores of green microalgae were moved through the atmosphere by clouds and blown across the earth on trade winds, mixing with the rain and falling as blood. Lucky for us, blood rain does not actually mean the end of the world is nigh. If you discover a bloody rain of terror spilling from the clouds, don't panic. Have you ever been bloody rained on? Number 4. Lights in the sky. In Australia, residents were terrified when they looked up at the night sky to discover what appeared to be a train of bizarre alien lights glowing in a perfect line across the empty sky. Someone even tweeted, "Please tell me that the long strain of lights in the sky moving fast over the Central West was some kind of military exercise flying in formation. Does Australia have 30-odd aircraft in the RAF that would fly closely together, evenly spaced in a line at 5 a.m.? Just for fun?" Sorry to burst your bubble. While these strange lights may have appeared to be part of an extraterrestrial invasion or some kind of glitch in the Matrix, they were actually just satellites. The lights in the sky made up a line of about 60 satellites. Unsurprisingly, the satellites belong to Elon Musk. Apparently, Musk has been launching dozens of satellites at a time as part of his Starlink project, something that is going to deliver high-speed internet to some of the most remote places in the world. His plan is to actually have what is basically a train of tiny satellites at very low orbit across the atmosphere, raining down affordable internet on everyone. According to ABC News, there are so far over 1,200 satellites in orbit, with plans of launching perhaps 30,000 more. Number 3. The Monster Star. Back in 2019, scientists witnessed an event unlike any other. They looked into the sky and discovered a giant star that they claim to be 2.5 million times brighter than our sun. Just try to imagine a star over 2 million times brighter than our own sun. Pluto would melt and you would be turned to ash in seconds. The real mystery is where the star went after it was discovered. According to a new paper published in Royal Astronomical Society, the best theory scientists have is that the enormous star collapsed and turned into a black hole without exploding into a supernova first, though nobody can say just how in the universe that happened. Jose Gros from the Trinity College Dublin called it one of the most massive stars present in our local universe. It was located about 75 million light years from us. If true, this would be the first direct detection of such a monster star ending its life in this manner. Andrew Allen, study lead author and also of Trinity College, said in the statement. Number 2. Snake eel. In a shocking turn of events, amateur photographer Sam Davis found a heron flying through midair with a snake eel hanging from its stomach. Sam actually witnessed the moment the eel burst from the bird's stomach mid-flight. He even snapped a shot of the eel dangling bewildered as the heron flew on like nothing was happening. According to Sam himself, the heron went around the water and flew about like nothing was wrong. Sam did, however, spot eagles and even a fox trailing after the bird, probably waiting for it to keel over. But how did the eel get into the heron's stomach in the first place? And how did it get free? Well, herons are notorious gluttons. The heron probably stuffed the snake eel into its belly, only to have the snake eel perform a bold escape by slicing open the heron's stomach from the inside with the tip of its tail, and then slithering its way out. The problem for the snake eel was that it did so while the heron was airborne. Unfortunately, Sam never found out if either the eel snake or the heron survived the end of the day. Number 1. Aliens in China. In 2010, an unidentified flying object was spotted in the sky above Huangshao, China. It was so terrifying that the local Shaoxian airport was forced to cease operations on July 7th. The object was first seen by a flight crew while preparing to descend at around 8:40 p.m. The flight crew notified air traffic control, the aviation authorities responded shortly after, and every outbound flight was grounded, while inbound flights were diverted to other airports. This UFO affected a total of 18 flights, according to ABC News. Normal operations started up again a few hours later, with Chinese media creating a firestorm of speculation as to what exactly the unidentified flying object was. Some thought it was a hidden United States bomber going towards China. Some thought it was an extraterrestrial from outer space, and others thought it could have been some kind of Russian satellite. Others put forth a more rational explanation, saying that the UFO was probably some kind of new aircraft or missile being tested out by the Chinese military. Pictures of the object were later released. The object appeared to be hovering in the sky, bathed in golden light and equipped with some kind of tail. Residents of the city also claimed that they witnessed red and white light spilling out of the mysterious object. To this day, nobody knows what the UFO was or why the airport shut down so quickly. Ignorant deaths in recent memory. It definitely could have been avoided. The young man was listening to music in his earbuds while crossing the train tracks near 60th Avenue. Rather than looking both ways to see if a train was coming, the guy just kept on trucking. He walked right in front of the speeding train and probably didn't even hear it because of his blaring music until it literally smashed him to pieces. According to CBC News, the young man died instantly. He didn't hear the train blowing its horn, he didn't see the train trying to slow down, and in the end, he probably only saw a sudden spark of light and then nothing at all. Even more horrifying is that the incident was witnessed by quite a few bystanders. The Edmonton city manager had to let everyone know that support services would be available for witnesses who were having a tough time with witnessing a man be blown into 1,000 pieces by a speeding train. Number 9. The Last Laugh. In Texas, a man was killed by an angry alligator. And while this isn't exactly a dumb way to die, the way in which it all unfolded was certainly stupid. The man had actually been mocking the alligators. The guy thought he was hot stuff. According to the report from CNN, the man mocked the alligators, ignored the warning signs, then jumped into the water with the savage reptiles. Police were called early on Friday morning when witnesses saw Tommy Woodward and an unidentified woman swimming together in the bayou with alligators. Witnesses then saw one of the big alligators that the man had been taunting take a big bite out of him. The woman managed to get away and escape, and Tommy Woodward's body was found several hours later. The really dumb part about this isn't exactly the mocking. The stupidest part was that the guy ignored the signs that explicitly warned no swimming with the alligators. In the end, the alligators got the last laugh. Would you dare swim with alligators? Hopefully not after what I just told you. Number 8. Death by licorice. A perfectly healthy man, only 54 years old and with every reason to live, collapsed dead from a heart attack. This isn't completely out of the ordinary, except that after his death, doctors discovered that it was all because of black licorice. According to a case study published recently in the New England Journal of Medicine, the man was a construction worker from Massachusetts who ate between 1 and 2 bags of black licorice every day for 3 full weeks. Then, while eating lunch one day, he collapsed out of nowhere. Do you eat black licorice? My dad loves it, but he doesn't eat it that often. I don't know of anyone else who eats it though. Kind of old-fashioned, right? Anyways, emergency workers tried to perform CPR to save the man's life, but he died within 24 hours of arriving at the Massachusetts General Hospital. The man had a very low level of potassium, which caused issues with his heart rhythm. Plus, the guy had a pretty poor diet and smoked a pack per day. In the end, it turned out that smoking and a poor diet weren't the only 2 factors in play. The guy's potassium levels had dropped and led to his cardiac arrest because of something known as glyceric acid inside of black licorice. They should really put a public health warning on these things. Number 7. Gender reveal explosion. An expecting father is dead after a gender reveal device went terribly wrong. Everyone wants to make the most out of every moment and to turn ordinary events into something spectacular. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But Christopher Peckney, 28 years old, is probably regretting his big gender reveal showcase after a device he was building in his New York State garage exploded and killed him, also injuring his younger brother. Christopher was expecting his first child. The device he was building was to explode in a perfectly safe way, revealing the gender of the baby to his friends and family. Christopher was a pretty mechanically inclined guy. His brother referred to the explosion as a freak accident that no one could have imagined. The police bomb squad investigated Christopher's home, but did not immediately reveal why the device exploded or what kinds of materials were involved. What the heck do you think he did? How did this even happen? Let me know in the comments below. And make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. We have lots more videos like this coming up. And let me know what you think the most embarrassing way to die would be. This next one might be on your list. Number 6. Illegal butt injection. A woman from Philadelphia named Leslie Ayala recently perished after receiving an illegal butt injection. It was technically an illegal buttocks injection, but either way, it killed her. Leslie received the illegal injection from a woman who had already been jailed for giving what the New York Daily News described as back alley butt enhancement jobs. The bogus butt doctor was in the room with Leslie when she suffered a sudden cardiac arrest and fell dead. It wasn't directly after the injection, but while she was recovering from it. A spokeswoman for the medical examiner said that Leslie died because of systemic silicone embolism syndrome, brought on by cosmetic silicone injections into her thighs and buttocks. And yeah, it kind of makes sense that she died from the procedure, considering the woman responsible for giving her the injection already went to prison twice for performing the botched procedures that she would often finish by closing wounds with crazy glue. Number 5. Virtual reality mishap. A man in Moscow recently died from virtual reality. He didn't die in the game and then die in real life. Instead, he suffered deadly wounds after wandering around his apartment wearing virtual reality goggles. The poor man was discovered dead in his apartment, covered in glass and soaked in blood. According to the preliminary investigation, the man was moving around in his apartment with the goggles on his face when he tripped, fell onto his glass table, and then bled out on the floor. This is the first officially reported death directly caused by virtual reality. Of course, it wasn't the fault of the virtual reality hardware. It was the man's own fault for wandering around in his apartment blind and crashing into a glass table. But still, this is probably only the first in what will become an increasingly popular way to accidentally die. Number 4. Too much work. A woman in Japan worked 159 hours of overtime in a single month and then died because of it. Misa Sato, a hard-working political journalist, died from heart failure because of way too much work. This woman was employed by the national broadcaster of the country. In the 30 days leading up to her death, she had only taken 2 days off. She was so dedicated to her job and so hell-bent on being seen as a valued member of the staff that she literally worked herself to death. Now, it's hard to say if this was a dumb death or, quite honestly, just a sad death. According to The Independent, roughly 2,000 people every year die in Japan because of work-related stress. There have been recent calls to change the work culture of Japan, because employees often work over 100 hours of overtime a month. As we can see with Misa Sato's sudden heart failure, this kind of productivity is beyond stupid. It's hard to be a productive member of the team when you're lying in a morgue. Number 3. Killed by his own invention. Francis Edgar Stanley created a steam-powered car known as the Stanley Steamer. He did this in Massachusetts and was on his way to becoming one of the greatest inventors in early automobile history. He created the earliest model of the Stanley Steamer in 1898 with his brother. 20 years later, on July 31st, 1918, Stanley was motoring around the town in the very car that he had invented. Francis Stanley was pushing his steamer to its limits when he hit a woodpile, flipped over, and then died from his wounds while being carried to the hospital. Stanley was killed in his very own invention. Back in the day, the Stanley Steamer was one of the fastest and most reliable cars available. The steamer had been developed as a possible alternative to the internal combustion motor. The Stanley Motor Carriage Company was the most successful United States automotive manufacturer when Stanley died. But maybe his death was a blessing in disguise. Stanley never lived to witness Ford's Model T and its internal combustion engine outsell and ultimately overtake every steam-powered automobile. Still, pretty embarrassing to be killed by your own invention. Number 2. Too much water. A 40-year-old woman from Huddersfield named Jacqueline Henson wanted to lose a few pounds. She went on a meal replacement diet plan. This diet plan involved eating 500 calories a day for approximately 12 weeks by replacing all solid meals with things like shakes and soups. It also involved drinking water. During the first week, Jacqueline lost over 10 pounds. A little while after, Jacqueline died from brain swelling. So, what went wrong? Jacqueline didn't realize that a person can drink way too much water. She thought water was a healthy part of her diet, so she drank about 4 liters of water while watching television in one sitting. After drinking all that water, she complained that her stomach hurt. She later got sick, she came down with a brutal headache, and she died in the hospital the next day. All that water killed her. Nobody should be drinking that much water in a single sitting. It's known as water intoxication. Too much water in a short period of time fills your blood with water, dilutes the sodium and electrolytes in your blood, and ultimately disrupts your brain function. This is what causes the brain to swell, and this is what killed Jacqueline Henson. Number 1. Attack of the Rooster. A man in India was recently killed by a rooster. If you've ever seen a rooster in real life, you'll know these birds are pretty terrifying. You'll also know that they're small and easy to kick. Nobody should ever die from a rooster attack. Quite frankly, it's embarrassing. And yet, this unnamed victim was killed after he fitted a knife onto his rooster in preparation for an illegal cockfight in the south of India. Instead of attacking its opponent, the rooster stabbed the man in the groin with the knife fixed to its leg as it tried to escape. The guy died from blood loss before he could even get to a hospital. Some might say this was natural karma. Whatever your take, it was a pretty dumb way to go. The man was one of 16 who organized the cockfight where the accident took place. Local authorities were trying to hunt down the other organizers, with some suggesting all 15 of them should face charges of manslaughter for what happened to the dead fella, along with charges of illegal betting and hosting a cockfight. feet or 1.8 meters long. That pales in comparison to what lives on Earth today. But back then, this animal was a certified giant. It was a strange sea creature only recently described as one of the largest arthropods that ever lived. If you're not sure what an arthropod is, it's a class of animal that includes crabs and spiders. This multi-segmented monster is currently providing scientists with amazing clues as to how things like spiders and crabs evolved to have legs from the dozens of flaps this ancient monster used to swim through the water. Fossils of this beast were discovered on a hillside in Morocco. Researchers were only able to discover about 50 fragments of exoskeletons belonging to the creature. The largest complete specimen measured about 3.6 feet or 1 meter long, though in life it was stretched over 6 feet or 1.8 meters, making it the biggest creature on Earth at the time. It was a filter feeder and sifted tiny little creatures, possibly including crustaceans or the larvae of other marine organisms. The animal has been dubbed a Gyrocassus benmunle. It belongs to a group of animals called Anomalocariidids, which can be translated from Italian as strange shrimp. Number 9. Russian Loch Ness Monster. The Libyan cure devil is Russia's version of the Loch Ness Monster, and just recently it completely destroyed someone's fishing nets. This strange water monster lives in a remote lake about 100 miles or 160 kilometers away from civilization, deep inside its icy waters. Nobody has ever properly documented the beast, but a brave travel adventurer named Andrei Solovyev recently camped out at the lakeside in temperatures that dropped far below freezing to try and catch the mysterious creature on video. Instead of spotting the giant animal, Andre claims it broke his fishing nets. It left huge holes torn in them as if warning him to leave. Stories about the monster have apparently existed in the lake since at least the 19th century, and there have allegedly been sonar readings that indicate at least one huge monster is lurking beneath the surface. There have been many sightings of the beast over the years, and even Andre said he saw something huge and dark swimming in the middle of the lake. Of course, he never managed to snap any decent photographs of it. The beast has been estimated at about 30 feet or 9.1 meters long. Nobody is sure where it came from, or if it's some kind of prehistoric ocean monster that got trapped in the lake and continues to breed in isolation, or if it's all just hype and imagination. Number 8. The largest octopus. There is a giant monster living off the coast of British Columbia, Canada, and it is the largest known species of octopus on the planet. It's called the giant Pacific octopus, and the largest known specimen recently washed ashore and shocked scientists beyond belief. The octopus measured an outstanding 30 feet or 9.1 meters in length and weighed a whopping 600 pounds or 272 kilograms. Keeping in mind that the average size of a giant Pacific octopus is only about 17 feet or 5.1 meters long and 175 pounds or 79 kilograms. But that doesn't actually mean that this giant octopus was an anomaly. Some marine biologists believe the average documented giant Pacific octopus is just a baby. It's generally agreed that these creatures are able to grow far beyond 30 feet or 9.1 meters, possibly even up to 45 or 50 feet, 13 to 15 meters, with potential weights of over 1,000 pounds or 454 kilograms. None of these giants have ever truly been documented, but it's believed that they could be living much deeper than scientists are able to probe. There are also theories that the reason for such a wide disbursement in terms of range and individual habitat for the giant Pacific octopus is because there is probably more than one species. Recent DNA analysis of distinctive specimens from different habitats indicates that they are all one species divided into 3 subspecies. Here's what you also need to remember. Giant Pacific octopuses have been around for millions of years, with their earliest ancestor dating back at least 500 million years ago. 200 million years ago, there were probably giant Triassic octopuses so big that they could feed on Ichthyosaurus, ferocious marine predators that grew over 40 feet or 12 meters in length and were rivaled only by the megalodon. Number 7. The Kraken. The largest sea creature ever imagined by human minds is undoubtedly the mythical Kraken. The Kraken is a legendary beast, described in some stories as growing to be about 1.5 miles or 2.4 kilometers in length, with arms larger and thicker than masts of ships. Some claim the Kraken was originally based on sightings of giant squid, but nobody really knows for sure. Sailors used to worry that the Kraken could come out of the water at any moment to drag a ship into the murky depths. The Kraken was also associated with whirlpools, as it was said to be so big that when it emerged from the ocean, a huge whirlpool would form and swallow anything in its path. But how much truth is there to the Kraken? It was first mentioned in Scandinavian stories back in 1180 AD, with the sea monster residing near Norway and Iceland. Modern scientists have identified the Kraken as nothing more than a giant squid, with the first complete specimen of such an animal being caught for the first time in New Zealand in 1997. The animal is 25 feet or 7.6 meters long, although we know now that giant squid can grow to be up to 70 feet or 21 meters in length. Could a giant squid really grow so big that it could destroy a boat? Do you believe in the Kraken? Let me know in the comments below, and if you're liking this video, hit that thumbs up button, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Number 6. The ocean sunfish. The ocean sunfish is an animal of miraculous proportions. It is the heaviest bony fish in the world, with a maximum weight of around 5,100 pounds or 2,313 kilograms. What's really fascinating about the ocean sunfish is that it doesn't have a tail. It only has 2 dorsal fins, which it uses to glide through the water. From the top dorsal fin to the bottom dorsal fin, the ocean sunfish can be about 14 feet or 4.2 meters in length. It has to eat a lot of jellyfish to support its massive weight, but is otherwise pretty peaceful. What makes the ocean sunfish one of the most extraordinary giant creatures in the ocean is how fast it grows and how big it gets. A baby ocean sunfish is so small that it can fit on the tip of your finger and weigh less than a single gram. Then it undergoes the most impressive transformation of any animal in the ocean. It grows 60 million times larger than when it's first hatched, and it does it very quickly, gaining hundreds of pounds each and every year that it's alive. As a side note, sea lions in California are known to bite the fins off juvenile ocean sunfish and use them as frisbees. Number 5. The biggest great white. On average, a great white shark is between 11 and 15 feet, or 3.3 to 4.5 meters in length. However, perhaps the biggest great white shark ever seen by human eyes has been spotted more than once in recent years from the coast of Mexico's Guadalupe Island all the way to Hawaii. This massive shark has been estimated at over 20 feet or 6 meters long and is still growing. According to ABC News, it is the largest great white shark caught on camera and could be more than 50 years old. The shark was originally captured on video by Discovery Channel's Shark Week in 2013. Researchers managed to get a tag on the shark during their expedition. The tag is a scientific device that transmits the shark's location, depth, and other data to help better understand the animal's behavior and movement. The shark has since been identified as a female, and she has been given the nickname Deep Blue. In 2019, 6 years after her initial sighting, Deep Blue was filmed again by a documentary crew from National Geographic off the coast of Hawaii. She had a huge stomach and appeared to be pregnant at the time. Nobody knows if she has given birth since, but next time Deep Blue surfaces, she may have a giant young shark with her. Number 4. The biggest marine animal. The biggest marine animal in existence was recently spotted by an international team of ocean scientists. According to the report from Global News, the team labeled the giant marine creature as the largest living thing in the entire world. However, it's difficult to call the creature a single living animal. In reality, it is a monumental colony of tiny clones working together to form what you might call a giant jellyfish type of predator, one that looks like the world's longest floating shoelace. It's been called an alien tentacle, a long stringy thing, and even an entity, but what it's really called is a siphonophore. The largest siphonophore ever seen was discovered about 2,000 feet or 610 meters below the surface, glowing in the darkness of the ocean. It was spotted by researchers at the Schmidt Ocean Institute. How long is it exactly? Difficult to tell because the siphonophore was coiled in irregular spirals, but scientists were able to make an educated guess of about 150 feet or 46 meters. Number 3. Giant sea monkey. Biologists working with the Idaho National Guard have discovered a new species of shrimp that some have called giant sea monkeys. We all remember sea monkeys from our childhood. You sprinkle them into their tank and they grow into a small colony of creatures. But of course, sea monkeys were really just brine shrimp marketed to children as underwater apes. These brine shrimp grow to be just about half an inch. In comparison, the new species of fairy shrimp just discovered, very close relatives of brine shrimp, can grow to be roughly 3 inches or 7.6 centimeters in length. That doesn't sound very big, but it's pretty huge in the world of sea monkeys. These are the biggest fairy shrimp in the world and the largest sea monkeys ever. Unfortunately, they probably aren't going to put giant fairy shrimp into packages and sell them to children as sea monkeys anytime in the foreseeable future. Did you ever have sea monkeys? Number 2. Rare giant squid. Sightings of giant squid are exceptionally rare, and yet one of them washed ashore in South Africa just a little while ago, giving scientists a rare opportunity to study an intact specimen. It's hard to really describe just how rarely this happens. Despite how hard humans have tried for the past century, nobody has ever captured a live giant squid. For that matter, the first video of a giant squid swimming in the ocean was only captured in 2013. These things are huge monsters of the deep and extremely elusive. They're also smart enough to avoid humans and stick to the deepest parts of the ocean where we can't snatch them up. Giant squids are so big that they fight sperm whales. Expert scientists believe they can grow to be over 70 feet or 21 meters long. According to the people who found the squid on the beach in South Africa, it looks like a majestic prehistoric animal. Nobody could figure out how it died, and so far, nobody knows why it washed up on the shore. Even though this was technically a giant squid, it was significantly smaller than you might expect. It only looked to be around 15 feet or 4.5 meters long. Number 1. The giant clam. The largest giant clam ever found was over 4.5 feet or 1.3 meters wide. Giant clams definitely don't compare to giant sharks and monster squids when it comes to the most terrifying monsters in the ocean. But they are fascinating for just how heavy and big they can get. For example, how much do you think the 4.5 foot wide giant clam weighed? Maybe 100 pounds? Maybe 300? Nope. This clam weighed approximately 550 pounds. That is extremely heavy for something so small. But how is the giant clam so heavy? Well, most of its mass is actually inside of its shell. The meaty part inside of the clam only accounts for about 10% of its weight. It's the shell that's so heavy, along with all the symbiotic algae living inside of its cells. The algae gives clams energy by transforming carbon dioxide into food using photosynthesis, in exchange for a safe place to live. The clam provides nutrients that the algae needs for the photosynthesis by filter feeding tiny animals floating in the reef. The bright color you see on clamshells is a direct result of the symbiosis with the algae, and all the stuff going on inside the giant clam shell is what makes it so heavy. Jacob finally filmed his last video when he got sucked into a deadly whirlpool that he was trying to capture on film. A whirlpool is a body of rotating water produced by opposing currents or a current running into something else. You've probably seen smaller whirlpools can form when a sink or a bath is draining, but they can be extremely dangerous, especially the larger and more powerful ones in the seas or oceans, or in this case, the one Jacob swam into in the middle of the River Hale in Cornwall while wearing a plastic horse head. The horse head was meant to be a comedic prop that would be included in Jacob's video, but unfortunately, he didn't take the danger of the whirlpool seriously. The particular whirlpool is caused by underground tunnels that funnel sand out of the harbor. The churning water creates an intense whirlpool that nobody should ever try swimming into, and yet Jacob thought he could swim through the whirlpool and film the whole thing. By the time Jacob emerged at the other end of the whirlpool, he was dead. And let this be a lesson to everyone: never jump into a whirlpool. Number 9. The Boiling Lake. In the Mont Trois Pitons National Park, about 6.5 miles or 10.5 kilometers east of Rossau, Dominica, there is a boiling lake. The lake is about 200 to 250 feet or 60 to 76 meters across and fluctuates in depth, going from very deep to bone dry. When there's water in it, it's almost always boiling and enveloped in a cloud of dangerous vapor. The lake is sitting at the bottom of a sinkhole, a flooded fumarole that is an opening into the very crust of the earth. It's also connected to a nearby volcano, with steams and gas being emitted through the sinkhole from a cave of molten lava below. What this means is that when the sinkhole is filled with water, it becomes a boiling lake that emits toxic gas emissions. Basically, swimming inside Dominica's boiling lake could literally boil you alive, kind of like throwing a lobster into a pot of boiling water. It's been estimated that only 2 people have lost their lives at the boiling lake, and they hadn't even been swimming in it. They lost their lives because of the gas emissions leaking out of the lake. To jump into the water and splash around would be an invitation to death. It would be like swimming inside the mouth of an active volcano. It's kind of a no-brainer that one should never attempt to swim here. Number 8. The Nile River. Once upon a time, the Nile River in Egypt was populated by hungry crocodiles. In the days of the ancient Egyptians, swimming in the Nile River was a death sentence because there were so many of these vicious reptiles, and they were totally unafraid of eating anyone who dared come into their territory alive. When the Aswan High Dam was constructed in 1960, most of the crocodiles were displaced into a man-made lake. But that doesn't mean there aren't a few stragglers waiting at the shores of the Nile to take a bite out of unwary swimming tourists. Swimming in the Nile River is 1000% not recommended. But even if you don't get eaten by a crocodile, the Nile is known for giving people a disgusting skin infection known as schistosomiasis. The infection happens when skin comes into contact with unclean water. Even just sticking your toes into the Nile is enough to infect your feet. Symptoms of this horrible infection usually include itchy skin and a rash, along with a feeling of general sickness. It's not enough to kill a person, but it can spread across your whole body, making you itchy and giving you super uncomfortable symptoms like nausea and diarrhea until it finally goes away. It may seem like a fun idea to swim in the Nile River on your next trip to Egypt, but just don't do it. If you don't get eaten alive, you'll probably get a rash, or maybe even attacked by a water mummy. Who knows? Number 7. Hanakapiai Beach. Hanakapiai Beach, nestled in Hawaii's Napali coast, is one of the most beautiful, yet dangerous beaches to swim in the entire world. It's a remote beach with no road access, and just the trail alone to get here will take you a couple of hours. The word Hanakapiai translates to English as base sprinkling food. Does that sound like a pleasant place to go? It's the geography of the beach that really makes it so hazardous. The rip current here is one of the strongest ever. If you were to get caught in the riptide, you would most likely never be found. According to an official sign posted at the beach, there have been at least 83 drownings, last counted in 2008, with 15 of the victims' bodies never even being recovered. What's really scary about Hanakapiai Beach is that even just going into the water up to your knees can prove fatal. If you absolutely must get in the water, do so in the small, calmer pools in the Hanakapiai stream. The water is usually slow-moving and clear, but sometimes a bit cold. If the water is murkier though, then that is a sign of flooding and you should stay out of the river. Flash floods happen without any notice, making the beach even more treacherous. One second you're standing with the waves lapping your legs, the next, you're 6 miles or 9.6 kilometers out at sea with no way back. Do you think you'd risk it for the biscuit and check out this beach? Let me know in the comments below, and if you're liking this video, hit that thumbs up and subscribe button. Number 6. The Blue Hole. There is a place located in the Red Sea known as the Blue Hole, and it has been labeled as one of the most perilous diving spots in the world, even for the most experienced divers. The The recent death of professional diver Stephen Keenan proves just how fearsome this place is. Stephen was a 39-year-old diver from Dublin who drowned while trying to save another freediver, who was, at the time, attempting to cross what is locally known as the Arch of the Red Sea's dangerous blue hole in a single breath. This is one of the deadliest places to be swimming in the Red Sea, and the diver became disoriented. Stephen rushed to guide her to the surface, but he blacked out. The girl he'd been trying to save made it out of the water, but Stephen was found floating face down a fair distance away. But what is the Red Sea's blue hole? It's a sinkhole that goes down about 300 feet or 91 meters in the middle of the Red Sea, and is nicknamed by local divers as the Diver's Cemetery. But despite its horrible reputation, thousands of people flock every year to swim in the blue hole. Some of them, unfortunately, never make it out alive. Those who are able to descend 328 feet or 100 meters below come face to face with a 160-foot or 50-meter high opening to the Red Sea. It has been described as beautiful, and many state there is nothing else like it on the planet. It's like standing in an underwater cathedral. It may be beautiful, but the deadly consequences probably outweigh the views. Number 5. Lake Karachay. Lake Karachay in the Ural Mountains of Russia is considered to be the most polluted lake in the entire world, and the last place you ever want to go swimming. Between 1951 and 1953, it was used as a dumping site for Chelyabinsk 65, a nuclear waste storage plant. Basically, the lake is filled with radioactive garbage. The level of radioactivity here has been measured at 4.44 terabecquerels, which is pretty similar to the radioactive level found around Chernobyl after the disaster when the nuclear power plant had a meltdown. But how dangerous is it to swim in the most polluted lake in the world? According to the Natural Resources Defense Council, it is so dangerous that a human can die within 1 hour of swimming in the lake because of all of the pollutants. But Lake Karachay is even dangerous to people that are nowhere near it. In the 1960s, a drought and strong winds carried radioactive dust from the lake and irradiated roughly 500,000 people in nearby settlements, with similar levels as those near Hiroshima after the atomic bomb was dropped. After this disaster, the lake was filled with over 10,000 concrete blocks to keep the sediment from blowing away. But the lake is still toxic, and honestly, you probably shouldn't go anywhere near it. Number 4. The Hoover Dam. The Hoover Dam is not a place you want to go swimming. First of all, it's deadly. A brief dip in the Hoover Dam can get you sucked into one of the 10 turbines operating underneath the water. It's also super illegal. When Aaron Hughes, a British man on vacation in Vegas, went down to the Colorado River at the Hoover Dam, he was drunk and thought it would be a good idea to swim across the reservoir. He has since been given the title of the first person to ever survive swimming across the Hoover Dam reservoir, which borders Arizona and Nevada. When he got out of the water, he was immediately arrested and given a fine of $330. The only reason he survived the journey is that 9 of the turbines were not in operation. Otherwise, he would have gotten sucked under the water and turned into shredded cheese. According to The Guardian, 275 people have died in the last 10 years trying to swim the Hoover Dam, with none of them managing to cross its breadth. Number 3. The Ganges River. The Ganges River is the lifeline of India. Thousands of people swim in the Ganges River every day. People bathe in it, they wash their faces, they dump their cremated corpses, they dump their garbage. The Ganges River is filled with a range of pollutants, from sewage to industrial waste to the remains of bodies. And yet, this river is considered a holy place in India. Nobody has any problems with swimming in it, except, of course, for people who aren't from India. Some locals even drink this water on a daily basis. But here are the facts. According to the BBC, 300 million liters of domestic waste are dumped into the Ganges every single day. The city of Varanasi itself dumps the sewage of 1 million people into the waters. The level of fecal bacteria in the Ganges is 440 times the recommended maximum level for swimming in the United States. That means, by US standards, there is 440 times the maximum accepted level of poop bacteria in the Ganges. A British bacteriologist named Ernest Hanbury Henkin that was working in India reported in 1896 that the waters of the Ganges have an antibacterial action against cholera, and was later ascribed to be the bacteria-eating virus bacteriophage. Dr. Gopal Nath, a scientist at Banaras Hindu University, says that kids are affected the worst by bacterial infections during their first year of swimming in the river, and once bacteriophages are present in their intestine, he says, this gives them a natural immunity. Natural immunity or not, even though the locals swim and drink and party in the river, they're doing so in a variable swamp of feces. Number 2. Queensland. Queensland, Australia is one of the most dangerous places to go swimming, hands down. The waters off the coast of Queensland are filled with some of the most venomous sea creatures in the world. In 2021, a 17-year-old was killed while swimming at Patterson Point by the most venomous of all marine animals on the planet, the deadly box jellyfish. The boy was airlifted to Townsville Hospital and put into the intensive care unit, where he was then intubated for a full week before finally passing away. Since his death, local police and health officials have warned people swimming in the area to pay close attention. Without a protective suit, the stingers of the box jellyfish can easily kill someone. At least 70 people have died in Australia since the 1880s from coming into contact with a box jellyfish. And this is only one of the many poisonous animals lurking off the coast, with other things like blue-ringed octopuses just waiting to strike careless swimmers. Number 1. Rio Tinto. Rio Tinto translates into English as Red River. It's one of the most dangerous rivers to go swimming in anywhere across the world, but the reason for its lethality is actually quite fascinating. The river runs through the southwest of Spain, where for over 5,000 years, precious minerals such as copper and gold have been mined. Some scientists refer to Rio Tinto as the birthplace of both the Copper Age and the Bronze Age, and the river has been stained by all the mining activity. Rio Tinto was mined by the Iberians, Phoenicians, Greeks, Romans, and even Visigoths. After mining operations by the United Kingdom in the 19th century, Rio Tinto became so highly acidic that nobody should ever venture into the waters. To give you an example of just how acidic Rio Tinto is, the bacteria in the water has created a condition similar to what you might find on Jupiter's moon Europa. Some experts even say that the presence of bacteria in Rio Tinto and its similarity to what the surface of Europa may look like is evidence of possible life on Jupiter's moon. Her neighbor. According to the detectives on the case, Hannah Braun, 28 years old, left the toddler at home at 2 o'clock in the morning, wandered over to her neighbor's house, rang the doorbell, then entered the house on her own and tried to snatch her neighbor's 9-month-old child. What's even crazier is that she tried to steal a child right out from the neighbor's arms after literally breaking into her house. Talk about a bad babysitter. Luckily, the neighbor was able to get away from the lunatic and contact the authorities, who eventually arrived at the scene and arrested Hannah. But even after the arrest, nobody could speak as to the motive behind this bizarre or attempted kidnapping. Nobody knows what this woman was thinking or if drugs and alcohol had been involved. Even more disturbing is the fact that police found 2 young children in Hannah Braun's house, with one of the children telling officers that she had lost her mommy and was scared. At first glance, it seems like Hannah Braun was running around kidnapping neighborhood children for an unknown reason. What do you think possessed this person to do that? It just doesn't make sense. Something doesn't add up with this story. What was going on? Number 9. Throwing eggs. A man from Miami named Mitchell Igelko has finally made a plea deal to keep himself out of jail after being accused of harassing his neighbors. Mitchell was slammed with 5 years of probation, but he's lucky he didn't get jail time. Not only did he harass his neighbors in southwest Miami, he killed their lawns, he threw eggs at their houses, and he even firebombed a boat. It all began in 2008, when Mitchell got upset at one of his neighbors who hired a company to do some lawn work. Mitchell was angry because he owned a landscaping company and lived right next door. He could have done the work himself. He must have thought that it was awfully unfair that his neighbor didn't hire him. But you have to admit, after hearing what he did, maybe his neighbors had a reason for not hiring him. It was soon after hiring a competitor that the neighbor's house began to get vandalized. Some of the neighbors then got together and pitched in on a surveillance system. The cameras caught Mitchell doing things like spraying chemicals out of the window of his truck to kill the lawns in the neighborhood. He was also blamed for pouring flammable liquid on his neighbor's car and throwing objects at people's houses. This guy was obviously a menace and probably should have been put behind bars. But instead, Mitchell was arrested on charges of criminal mischief and ordered not to have any contact with his neighbors in the future. Lucky for him. If I were the judge, I'd have put him away for at least a few months just to teach him a lesson. What would you have done if you were that judge? Number 8. Music since 1999. In 2018, a Slovakian woman was arrested after driving her neighbors crazy by blasting opera music from her speakers 16 hours a day since 1999. The woman has not been identified, though it has been confirmed that she would play Giuseppe Verdi's La Traviata on a loop from first thing in the morning until last thing at night to drive her neighbors crazy. She had been doing it for almost 20 years straight. Finally, her neighbors took her to court and she was ordered to stop playing her music loudly. She ignored the ruling, went home, and turned up her stereo. The annoying woman was then arrested and accused with harassment and malicious public disturbance. According to her, she only blasted the music to cover the yipping of her neighbor's loud dog. But here's how you know the woman is crazy. The dog moved out of the neighborhood years ago. She just kept on playing the music anyway, living in her house with the same song blaring for 20 years like a crazy person from a Stephen King novel. Have you ever had a crazy neighbor? What did they do to tick you off? Tell me your wildest neighbor stories in the comments below. Then remember to subscribe to Titanic if you haven't already, so you can get all the latest amazing videos. Number 7. Minnesota hacker. A hacker in Minnesota has given new life to the term neighbor from hell after unleashing cyber terror on his neighbors that nearly ruined their lives. Barry Ardoff allegedly hacked into his neighbor's network in 2009 and used it to try and frame them for some very disturbing crimes. You can bet it was not great, trying to trap them with heinous and offensive online crimes. The hacker also tried to frame his neighbors for professional misconduct and even used his neighbor's internet to send threatening emails to politicians. Why did the hacker do this? It was apparently to get back at his neighbors after they told local police that the hacker had kissed their 4-year-old toddler on the lips. Clearly, he was deranged, and they reported Barry Ardoff to the police as a potential danger to children. To get revenge, Ardoff released his reign of cyber terror. But it didn't work out very well for Barry, who has since been given an 18-year prison sentence, with prosecutor Timothy Rank saying in a court filing, "Barry Ardoff demonstrated that he is a dangerous man after venting his anger in a calculated campaign of terror against his neighbors." Barry was charged with a whole heap of criminal wrongdoings, and even given a lifetime registration on the sex offender list. Number 6. Funeral break-in. In North Carolina, 2 individuals were charged with breaking and entering after robbing their neighbor's home while the other family was at the funeral for their dead toddler. The toddler had somehow gotten through the front door of the house, wandered into a different neighbor's yard, and then fell face down into their pond and drowned. As if this wasn't mortifying enough for the family, when they went to their own child's funeral, their nasty next-door neighbors took the opportunity to break into their property and steal over $4,000 in goods. The worst part is that nobody knew who did it. It wasn't until investigators learned that 2 neighbors had sold jewelry to a local metal dealer that they were able to make the connection, and from there they were able to track down the ruthless neighbors and lock them up. Now, of course, the criminals are facing serious prison time for their evil deeds. I mean, really? Who steals from a family at their child's funeral? It really boggles the mind. Number 5. Shooting at the neighbor's kids. Betty Francis was 84 years old when she fired her gun at her neighbors and their children because they were being too noisy. It all started with a dispute. Betty said her neighbor's children's motorcycles were too loud. She didn't like all the noise. She told them to shut up, and they got into an argument. That was when Betty shot a round from her handgun directly at the family and their children, shooting from the lawn right beside them. What a crotchety old lady. No one would have ever expected that she would bring out a gun, right? Only in America. This old woman thought she could win the argument and keep the family quiet by literally shooting at them with a loaded gun. Of course, you can't just shoot at your neighbors for being loud. We do live in a society with rules after all. Betty was arrested and charged with child endangerment and assault with a firearm, according to the Shasta County Sheriff's Office. Nobody was hurt during the incident, and it's not clear whether the children quit making noise after she was gone, but they should watch out. Betty has since been released on bail, and to be quite honest, we should all be fearing for the life of her neighbors. At 84 years old, who knows what a crazy person is capable of? Number 4. Booby traps. A businesswoman who retired to the north of England for a life of peace and tranquility has been recently convicted after turning her new home into a house of horrors through what has been called a rampaging campaign of pure evil and hatred. 57-year-old Jeanne Wilding was caught dumping oil, animal corpses, and even broken glass under her neighbors' driveways, leaving booby traps for them to step in. It all started because of an argument about roots and pruning rights. The argument spiraled into an all-out war between Jeanne and the entire neighborhood, with at least 15 neighbors making 257 official complaints. Throughout the battle, Jeanne was arrested no less than 30 times for attempting to mentally disturb and demoralize her neighbors. During the court proceedings, it came out that Jeanne hated her neighbors so badly that she would make booby traps out of paint tins and flower pots to try to injure her neighbors and their families. And she even installed spotlights and aimed them at their windows. After 3 years of terror, the case finally ended and Jeanne was ordered to pay over $75,000 in damages. I don't understand it personally. Just move away if you can't get along. What would you do if your neighbor started booby trapping your driveway? Number 3. The middle finger. In Orchard Lake, a man named Alan Markovich erected a giant sculpture of a hand giving the middle finger in his backyard almost 12 feet or 3.8 meters high with a spotlight that illuminates it at night. The giant middle finger is pointed straight at his neighbor's house. He apparently spent $7,000 on the giant hand because he says he's angry at the man who lives next door because he had an affair with Markovich's ex-wife. Not only that, but his wife also lives next door with his neighbor. In a recent interview, Markovich claimed to be over his wife and the man she left him for. But one might argue that the $7,000 middle finger is evidence against that. Plus, why did Markovich even move next door to them in the first place? He said it was a coincidence, but he seems more like a teenager with a bruised ego than anything else. Imagine being his neighbor and having to look out your front window every day in the house you had to pay a fortune for at a giant middle finger. The pettiness is legendary, but also hilarious, don't you think? Number 2. The stolen credit card. Anthony James David took his neighbors to see an NFL game. This seems like a pretty neighborly thing to do, but the Florida man wasn't as generous as he may appear. This is because he treated his neighbors to a Tampa Bay Buccaneers football game using that very same neighbor's credit card to pay for the tickets. And no, the neighbor did not give him permission to do so. Anthony has since been arrested on charges of fraud, according to the Hernando County Sheriff's Department. The arrest came after his 2 neighbors reported that their credit cards had been used fraudulently to purchase all kinds of different goods, from flowers to food to legal services from an attorney, and of course for tickets to an NFL game. But you have to admit, it is kind of funny. Anthony took his neighbors out, treated them to an awesome day, and they found out later by looking at their credit card statement that they paid for the whole thing. Maybe Anthony felt bad about stealing their identity and wanted to give them something back using their own money. In the end, Anthony charged just shy of $3,000 to their credit card and got busted for the crime. Number 1. A pile of manure. In New Brunswick, Canada, a couple has accused their neighbors of trying to annoy them by building a massive wall of manure along their property line. The giant pile of poo was so stinky that whenever the wind blew towards the couple's house, it would reek. It was also very stinky after a rain. If you're thinking to yourself, well, just how big could this pile of manure be? It was so huge that you could see it from Google Earth. The massive pile of manure just appeared in November of 2013 and was there until at least October of 2014. The couple was so annoyed by their neighbor that they sued them and won in court, getting a settlement of $15,000. $100,000 after a judge agreed that the neighbor used manure as a tool of harassment. Nobody's really sure how the dispute got started in the rural Canadian town. Both parties had been living side by side for at least 10 years. Somewhere along the way, they stopped being neighborly. One neighbor tried to stink the other neighbor out of the area. They lost $15,000 in the process. The lesson here is that it really doesn't pay to be a bad neighbor. What's the worst thing you've ever done to your neighbor? Tell me about it in the comments. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more wild videos.